Well, folks, Democrats are in an absolute panic that 12-year-olds will no longer have access to gender affirming care. They are so mad. They are so mad that 12-year-olds will no longer be able to chemically or surgically destroy their body to the point of no return, which is just absolutely ridiculous that a major political party in the greatest country that this world has ever seen can take a position so sick and demonic like this. This 12-year-old, this child, this minor, can't drive a car. They can't buy spray paint at the store. But now somehow we're going to trust them to make a life-altering decision that will prevent them from ever having a family of their own in the future. Absolutely destroying their bodies to the point of no return. But folks, we have a lot to get into today. But if you're new here, drop down below, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another video from us in the future. Now, obviously, we know that I believe it was back on January 28th, President Trump signed an executive order. It was titled Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. Now, this executive order aimed to restrict this, I call it child mutilation. Some people call it gender affirming care. For YouTube's algorithm, so they don't try and censor me, we'll say that's gender affirming care, whatever. And that's going to include things like puberty blockers, hormone therapies, and actual surgical procedures. Now, for individuals, in this executive order is tailored towards individuals under the age of 19. So the administration describes these treatments as maiming and sterilizing. They say that it leads to irreversible consequences for minors, which is correct. The order directs federal agencies to withhold any federal funding from medical institutions that provide this care to minors. They also go as far as to instruct the Department of Human and Health Services, which is now run by RFK Jr., just recently confirmed last week, that they're going to revise all insurance policies that are covered under Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act to exclude coverage for these treatments altogether. Now, also, it seeks to protect any whistleblowers who is going to report an institution or an entity that is offering this care violating federal law. Now, obviously, this executive order, it prohibits federal funding to any institution that sponsors, promotes, assists, or supports transitioning of minors. So this is directed at minors. When you're over the age of 18, you can do what you want. Nobody disagrees about that. It is still just as sick and demonic of a practice, but we're here to protect minors. We're here to protect innocent children who they need an adult. They need someone who's going to stand up for them. They're easily malleable. These children could be easily steered down the wrong path, and we need to be adults in the room for these kids. They are asking for an adult to be in the room to help them, guide them through life. If you don't remember, being a kid is pretty freaking difficult. It's difficult. It's different than being an adult, and being an adult has its own difficulties. But being a child is difficult. Growing up is difficult. And we need to make sure that all medical and psychological services that are ultimately going to get a child to transition surgically or to start them on hormone therapies is squashed. There's no more. And obviously, Trump even went further that, the federal insurance programs under Medicare, TRICARE, which is offered to, what is it called? People in the military, and then also the federal employee benefits program, they're slashing any coverage for transitions for minors. Now, the Office of Personnel Management has also instructed carriers, like I said, for all federal employees that are under 19, or for any coverage for people under 19, we're not going to be providing that health care from a federally sponsored health insurance plan. Now, following this order, there have been many hospitals, especially big cities like New York, we've seen. Hospitals, clinics have paused offering this type of care to minors, really leading to, I'd say, widespread uncertainty about these services, which is great. I want uncertainty. I don't want these kids to have access to this. Thank God there's some uncertainty and there's some disruption. That is exactly what's needed. Now, many people are going to try and challenge this in court, and they already have. Because in response to this executive order, 3 states, Washington, Oregon, and Minnesota, along with 3 physicians that specialize in transgender healthcare, filed lawsuits against the Trump administration. Now, they're arguing that this infringes on their rights. I believe it's states' rights, and that between a doctor and a patient, this is violating the constitutional protections that they have. Now, Washington and Oregon, obviously, they are states known for very progressive policies supporting this kind of radical transition of children from one gender to another, believing that there are more than 2 sexes. And they're saying that the executive order undermines their ability to regulate healthcare within the jurisdictions that inside of these states. And in Minnesota, they're arguing with the horrible, horrible Attorney General Keith Ellison, who doesn't want to take care of any of the violent crime that's going on in Minneapolis, but here we are making sure that 12-year-olds can forever mutilate their bodies, forever. And he's basically saying that the state regulations in place are to protect the transgender youth, and this executive order is disrupting that practice. Now, like we said, there are 3 physicians that are also involved in the lawsuit. They are healthcare providers, if you can even call it's supposed to be care. Where's the care in mutilating a young child's body? I think that's more of like a psychological disorder. Like, if you really want to mutilate a young child, that should get you thrown in a psych ward, to be honest with you. That's what I believe, at least. But they're saying that these executive orders interferes with their ability to make medical judgment and they have ethical obligations to provide this care to patients. Let's just point something out. They want to talk about how they have an ethical obligation. There is no data to prove that mental health for youth is improved after chemical or surgical intervention. The amount of psychiatric visits, the amount of medications that are being given to these children stays about the same, whether they transition surgically or chemically or not, or they just walk around and say that there's something else. Let's just get the facts out there to begin with. Now, they're claiming that the executive order violates the 10th Amendment, which basically, if the federal government does not, if they don't regulate something, it is left up to each individual states. And they're saying that the healthcare regulation falls under state jurisdiction and that the federal government is really overstepping its authority. Now, really the central focus or the central piece of this dispute is whether the executive order is going to violate the 10th Amendment. Now, the amendment reserves powers that we don't delegate to the federal government to the state governments or to the people directly, which I think it's a fair question to ask, but with a little bit of insight, a little bit of knowledge, you would know that this is not an overreach into state-regulated healthcare practices. Obviously, you look at what Obama did with the ACA. The federal government has a very big role when it comes to healthcare in the individual mandate. So these states that are suing, they're saying it encroaches on their sovereignty, these federal mandates on healthcare services. And it asserts that federal intervention is going to disrupt their state policies they have in place and the healthcare systems that they say are tailored to their population. And now a lot of people are very supportive. Like, this is an 80-20 issue. Let's just take a step back and reframe this right here. We're talking about this as if it's a 50-50 issue. This is an 80-20 issue. 80% of Americans believe that minors should not have access to chemical or surgical transition services. So remember, this is the 20%, maybe not even that. This is like the 10, 15%. Now, the people who are very supportive of this executive order, they're saying that the federal government, and what I believe is that the federal government has a vested interest in regulating these practices. They get federal funding. Like we federally fund, like the one of the largest healthcare system or hospital systems in New York, the Langone healthcare system, received almost $1 billion in federal funding. They no longer are doing these transition cases. They could not survive without the federal funding. They could not. And setting a nationwide standard for these medical treatments especially when it involves a minor, someone whose brain is not fully developed, someone who does not have the ability to make the best decisions for themselves. A lot of adults can't make the best decisions for themselves. Yet we expect a 12-year-old to know what they're going to want when they're 40. I'll be honest with you. My parents didn't want to have kids. My dad did not want to have kids for most of his life. Didn't have me until I believe he was about 40. When he was 20 years old, he could have made a decision that would have sterilized him for the rest of his life. How would he know that 20 years later that something like this would happen and then you want kids? You have no ability to judge what you're going to want in 40 years from now. We don't let you have we don't let a child get a tattoo. And it's going to affect them, but it's not like a tattoo. It's on their skin. It's a visible thing. It's not it's not like they can't get a job anymore because of it, or they can't have kids, or they don't have a foot. Like, there are so many protections in place for these minors, and it absolutely falls within the federal jurisdiction to ensure that there's consistency through every state on this. We're all about states' rights here. I'm all about states' rights. But the federal government's purpose is to step in when there are big things like this. When there's a big thing with the vast majority support it, that is when the federal government needs to step in. And even sometimes when they don't, when it's not an 80-20 issue. But when it is a big issue that matters, that this is something that cannot be left up to the states, we need to take care of this immediately. We need to make sure that the welfare of these children is taken care of and protected. And this debate, it really touches upon, is going to touch on previous cases where federal authority in healthcare was challenges, like we talked about. The Affordable Care Act, it disputes, there was a dispute over the Affordable Care Act, whether this is something that was legal. And the outcomes of these cases are going to influence how the court interprets the balance of power between the states, the federal government, and being able to regulate medical practices like this. Now, these executive orders have really ignited a discussion about what role do these medical organizations have in determining how appropriate these surgeries are. We also know that for the healthcare industry, this is a very, very profitable niche of the healthcare industry. These gender-affirming cares, they make tons of money. So are we protecting children, or are we looking to make an extra buck at the expense of the most vulnerable people in our society? And there are many, many medical associations, which is sad, that advocate for these treatments. And I really think that we must question the motives and the integrity of these people in what they're endorsing. Are they endorsing this because they're sick, they're mentally ill? Are they endorsing this because of money? Because they know the profits that lie inside of these surgeries, inside of these procedures that can be done? You look at associations like the American Medical Association. They support access to gender care like this for minors. They say that the evidence that such treatments can alleviate gender dysphoria. Well, hold up. Gender dysphoria is when you're confused about what your sex is. So if you're born a boy, you transition surgically to become a girl, the gender dysphoria goes away. No, it doesn't go away. It's masked. It's masked at the expense of a minor who does not understand the long-term implications of what's going to happen here. Also, institutions like the American Academy of Pediatrics, they recommend that youth have access to comprehensive gender-affirming care and that they develop healthcare services for these minors. You know what I say? To hell with these institutions. You're going to tell me mutilating a child is right? That it's good for their mental health? Get the hell away from me. You should be defunded. You should be sued. That is just sick. And you wonder why there's such a distrust in established organizations, medical associations like this. And I don't blame him. This is the natural consequence. The natural consequence of doing bullcrap like this is you get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the head of Health and Human Services. Can't wait to see what he does there. Cannot wait for it. Because these organizations like the AMA and the AAP argue that this care is essential for the well-being of transgender youth. Yes, mutilating a child is essential for their well-being. Yep. I was never mutilated as a child, and I don't feel like I missed out on anything. They say it helps to reduce the rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. How about this? Maybe the person has gender dysphoria, but have we checked all the boxes that this isn't a mental health crisis, not a surgical intervention, something that demands surgical intervention or chemical intervention? Like it is ridiculous. And now they emphasize that these medical decisions should be made with the patients, their families, and the healthcare providers. But ultimately, the healthcare providers telling them what to do. They're walking in, they're saying, if you don't do this for your kid's going to go home and kill themselves. How about this? Let's start by looking at the nuclear family. Does that child who has gender dysphoria, did they come from a healthy family with 2 parents in the household? Did they come from a healthy family? Maybe you need to look at the parents. How did you mess up? How did you mess up so bad that this is what's going on with your kid here? And how stupid of you. This kid needs to go see a therapist. They need to talk with someone. But you also need to monitor that because you don't want a therapist who's just going to tell him that, oh, well, you need surgery and that's going to help anything. You are internally distressed about who you are. So how does cutting off your penis make you more of who you are? Like, you want to feel comfortable in your own skin. I get it. But this is the skin you have. If you're not comfortable with who you are, so you're going to chemically, surgically change yourself so you can never have kids ever again. Should not be happening to the minors, the most vulnerable people in our society. Should never be happening. Now, we should be talking so much about this care for minors. It's not even care. It's bullcrap for these minors. We need to question what are the long-term effects? What are the ethical implications of this treatment? There are many that argue that these medical organizations are being influenced by politics, ideological agendas, rather than the actual care of the patient. We know the healthcare industry is messed up. We know they don't have their priorities straight most places. You look at it. You look at someone who's got cancer. What is our medical system set up to do? What is it set up? It is set up to try and cure that cancer. They don't want to prevent it. They just want to cure that cancer once you get it. Because if they prevent it, well, then where's the money going to be made at? Oh, if someone has gender dysphoria, okay, instead of putting them on chemicals or surgically mutilating them, let's have them talk with a well-trained psychiatrist that's not going to point them towards this. Oh, well, you're going to pay $100 a session, and health insurance is going to pay for most of it. So maybe they make, instead of, you go see a psychiatrist for a year, they grow out of it. Let's say the healthcare industry makes $100, $200 in profit for that. Well, if we refer them off to get surgery or to get chemical castration, well, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in profit that they're leaving on the table. I do not believe that they are not looking out for the well-being of their patient. They are being influenced by these political and ideological agendas. The medical community continues to engage in these debates, and it is inappropriate to have this debate about minors. You cannot reverse these treatments. These affect bone density, bone growth. They sterilize you. It is sick what these Democrats want to do, these left-wing lunatics want to do. They want to make sure every 12-year-old in America can be mutilated so they can never have kids again. Just absolutely sick. And I love covering the news and what's going on. But the reality is that this is the shit that pisses me off. This stuff is what gets me going. This is what boils my blood. We must fight at every step of the way to make sure that children in our society are protected from conception until they're 18. And we should make sure they're protected through their whole life. But ultimately, when you turn 18, when you turn 19, when you become an adult, it is up to you to make the decisions for yourself. But when you're a minor, it is our duty as Americans to make sure that you are protected from this. So fight as hard as you can to make sure this doesn't happen. Focus on your strong nuclear family. Make sure you have good relationships with your kids, good relationships with the people in your family. Make sure that this never happens to you or your family. And take care of those people if they start to go down that rabbit hole. Don't let them go down it alone. Guide them in the right direction. Guide them away from chemical castration or surgical castration. But so for today, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments about these sick 3 attorney generals and 3 physicians that are trying to sue to have this executive order reversed. And as always, go down below, hit that like, share button, and if you enjoy this, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode from us again. Until next time.